Human history has long been concerned with documenting wars and battles. The first reliably recorded battle in history was the 1457 BCE Battle of Megiddo in Israel. It may come as no surprise that most of the deadliest battles in history occurred during the age of industrialized warfare. But be sure to stick around for number 1 as we count down the 7 deadliest battles in history. Number 7. The Battle of the Somme, 1916. On the first day of this battle, July 1, 1916, the British forces suffered more than 57,000 casualties, including 19,000 deaths. The British had bombarded the German lines with artillery for a week before the first advance. However, the German defenses were not destroyed, as was expected. The initial push of the young, inexperienced volunteer army suffered as a result. After the fight, the survivors became battle-hardened soldiers and proved themselves to be a force to be reckoned with throughout the remainder of World War I. But it wasn't just the British who suffered heavy casualties. The battle was hard-fought, and the French and Germans also lost many men in every advance. Tanks were used for the first time in battle by the British, but as they were still in the development stage, many broke down before they reached the front line. On November 18th, General Douglas Haig called off the battle due to the worsening weather conditions. The British forces had only managed to advance 7 miles over the course of 5 months, and there was no decisive winner of the battle as the Allied forces had not managed to break the German lines. In total, there were around 1.12 million casualties, including both civilians and those fighting. The only real success of the Somme was that it diverted German troops away from the French forces at Verdun. Number 6. The Battle of Stalingrad, 1942 to 1943. The Battle of Stalingrad is often referred to as the greatest battle of World War II. The Soviets successfully defended the city, making a turn in the tide of the war in favor of the Allies. After invading the Soviet Union in 1941, the German forces had advanced to the outskirts of Stalingrad by August of 1942. The city, now known as Volgograd, was an industrial center and an important shipping route due to the Volga River running through the city. On August 23rd, the 6th Army of the Wehrmacht began their attack. Russian forces held off the Germans despite suffering heavy losses. Stalingrad had been stocked up with supplies to wait out a lengthy siege if necessary. However, civilians were not evacuated as Russian leadership believed the army would fight harder if they had citizens to defend. The Luftwaffe conducted dozens of airstrikes, causing many civilian deaths, and by September, the skies were ruled by the German Air Force. The Russians continued to suffer heavy losses, and Stalingrad was soon devastated by the constant air attacks. However, Stalin forbade his troops to retreat or surrender. Russian reinforcements arrived, and by late November, the Russian forces had cut off the Germans from their supply lines and essentially had them surrounded. The Germans found themselves trapped without supplies as the harsh Russian winter set in. Due to further Russian gains, German generals abandoned attempts to save the troops trapped in Stalingrad. Yet Hitler refused to surrender despite his men slowly running out of ammunition as they starved. By February 1943, the Russians had regained control of Stalingrad, but the conflict had caused around 1.25 million casualties. Number 5. The Battle of Berlin, 1945. After their defeat at the Battle of Stalingrad, the German forces steadily retreated, and despite heavy losses, by April 1945, the Soviet Red Army had made it to Berlin. While Nazi forces were more than willing to surrender to the British and Americans, safe in the knowledge that they would be treated humanely as per the Geneva Convention, they had no such assurance at the hands of Russian troops. Because of this, many German soldiers chose to die fighting the Russians rather than die as their captives. The Russian troops vastly outnumbered the Germans when the battle began, with the Soviets easily defeating the German forces outside Berlin on April 16th. On April 20th, the Russians started bombing Berlin and surrounded the city in a few days. By this point, many German soldiers were wounded, sick, or starving, and the German army had begun recruiting older men and young boys to defend the city. On April 30th, the Soviets made it to the city center, just as the Germans' ammunition was running low. Hitler and his wife Eva, seeing no escape, committed suicide rather than face retribution. On May 1st, German soldiers attempted to flee the city. and by May 7th, all the German leaders had surrendered to the Allies. This battle resulted in around 1.3 million casualties, comprised of Russian and German soldiers and German civilians. Number 4. German Spring Offensive, 1918. On March 21, 1918, Germany launched an attack that it hoped would win the war, wanting to beat the British before the Americans could send a significant number of forces. The Germans attacked the Western Front, where they knew the British Army was weakest, and fired 1 million artillery shells at the Fifth Army stationed just south of the River Somme. Over 3,000 shells per minute bombarded the British for 5 hours, followed by an attack of elite troops carrying weapons and little else. The German soldiers caused panic behind the British lines, as they used flamethrowers and captured 21,000 British soldiers on the first day. The initial attack was a huge success for Germany, which had even successfully shelled Paris with their Krupp's cannons. Many Germans thought that the war was all but over. However, they had advanced with such speed due to their troops carrying nothing but weapons, which put their supply chains under great strain, that the leading German formation was forced to eat their horses as they advanced. As a result of their quick progress, the Germans had suffered heavy casualties, and their ultimate target of France's northern city of Amiens was thwarted when the starving German troops stayed in Albert, where they looted shops for food. In June, thousands of American troops had started to arrive in Europe. On July 15, 1918, General German Erich Ludendorff ordered a disastrous last offensive. Aware of the German supply issues, the French army allowed them to advance and then launched a massive counterattack. The total casualties were around 1.5 million, most of which were German soldiers. Number 3. The Battle of the Dnieper, 1943. During the summer of 1943, the Nazis were still trying to turn the war back in their favor. In an attempt to stop the advance of the Red Army, they built a series of defenses on the western bank of the river Dnieper, called the Eastern Wall. The river created a natural boundary, and after the Germans started to suffer defeats, they used the barrier of the river to secure their retreat. On September 15th, fresh from defeat at Stalingrad and Kursk, Hitler ordered the Army Group South to fall back behind the defenses at Dnieper. The Germans thought that the river afforded them safety, and at first they were right. However, by the end of September, the Soviets had established 20 bridgeheads. As usual, the Soviets paid for their success with the lives of their own soldiers, and by October they had lost around half of the troops stationed there. One soldier responsible for building the bridges recalled, "I remember well how, when we were crossing the Dnieper, the water in the river turned red with blood. Hundreds of comrades died before my eyes." However, their sacrifice worked to secure them a swift advance, and by the end of 1943, the Red Army continued its advance towards Germany. Estimates are that the fatalities reached nearly 1.5 million, although this number is highly debated and may go even higher. Regardless, this was one of the deadliest battles of World War II. Number 2. The Brusilov Offensive, 1916. The Brusilov Offensive was the largest assault by the Russians during World War I. Named after its instigator, General Alexei Brusilov, it crushed the Austro-Hungarian Empire, which never recovered from the defeat. Many Russian generals doubted that an all-out offensive would work, but Brusilov argued that he could pull it off with sufficient training and complete secrecy. He trained his troops in life-size replicas of the planned attack positions. This offensive was in response to France's desperate pleas for Allied forces to try and distract the Germans from Verdun, which was why the British planned their assault at the Somme River. The Russians were quicker to act than the Brits, commencing their attack on June 4th. The Russian tactics were similar to what the British would attempt just over a month later. However, the Russians were much more successful. They bombarded the Austrian troops with around 2,000 guns along a 200-mile-long stretch from the Bukovina region to the Carpathian Mountains. The Austrians outnumbered the Russians, but the initial artillery attack destroyed this advantage. Within 2 days, the Russians had advanced around 46 miles, over 6 times the distance the British would advance during the Battle of the Somme. In June, the Germans were forced to redirect troops from Verdun to aid Austria just before the British launched their attack at the Somme. The success of Brusilov's offensive took its toll on the Russian forces, and by September they had begun to run out of resources. On September 20, 1916, the attack was halted, but it resulted in 1.6 million casualties. Number 1. The Siege of Baghdad, 1258. The only battle on this list that happened before industrialized warfare, the number 1 spot goes to the Mongols' sacking of Baghdad. After a 12-day siege, the golden age of Islam came to a violent end at the hands of Hulagu Khan, Genghis Khan's grandson, and his army. The Mongol Empire had been expanding since 1162, and in 1258 it ruled large areas of Europe under the fourth Khagan of the Mongol Empire, Mongke. Mongke wanted to continue the Mongol expansion and subjugate Mesopotamia, Syria, and Iran, and raised the largest Mongol army in history, thought to total up to 150,000 men. After subduing many cities in Iran, the army reached Baghdad, where Caliph al-Mustasim Billah was offered the chance to surrender. For reasons that can only be speculated, al-Mustasim refused, but did little to fortify the city against the upcoming onslaught. Al-Mustasim's cavalry was crushed by the large Mongol army, leaving Baghdad surrounded and defenseless. The siege began on January 29, 1258, and by February 5th, it was clear the Mongols would soon be inside the city. Al-Mustasim then attempted to negotiate, and thousands of nobles went to offer terms of surrender, but they were all killed. On February 13th, the Mongols entered the city, slaughtering all inhabitants, aside from the Nestorian Christians who shared a religion with Hulagu's mother. The libraries, hospitals, and even the House of Wisdom were razed to the ground, destroying all the knowledge held in this great cultural center. Men, women, and children were slaughtered over the course of a week before al-Mustasim was killed and the bloodbath ended. The Mongols had decreed that royal blood could not be spilled on the earth, so the caliph was rolled in a carpet and trampled to death by horses. The destruction plunged the Muslim world into a period of decline. Centuries of knowledge were lost, and it is believed that over 2 million people were killed, making it the deadliest battle in history. Did you agree with our picks for the top 7 deadliest battles? Let us know in the comments below. We hope you enjoyed our video, The Top 7 Deadliest Battles in the History of the World. If you did, please hit the like button and subscribe for more videos like this. Also, grab your free mythology bundle ebook while it's still available. All links are in the description.